All right. In this video, we're going to be talking about transactions. We'll see how to create transactions. We'll see how we could put those transactions to use, and how we can nest transactions. Nesting of transactions is a transaction inside a transaction. So why do you all need that? All right. Okay. So to begin with, let's talk about what is a transaction and what is a need for having a transaction in our scripting. Okay, if you look around over here, you see that we have a v user in it. We have this action which we have disabled it. We are not executing it, at least in this script. So we have v user in it, rate lookup, book new reservation, cancel reservation, and then we have v user n. Well, each one of them are basically, each one of them is a process in its own, right? But overall, if you see, it's like somebody's logging in to this application, then they're searching for the application for certain rates, and then they would go ahead and then make a reservation, for those rates. So there's a possibility that we are, any one of these might take a long time to execute. So they would like to find out, the stakeholders, they want to find out, like, what is the response time when it comes to, like, searching for a rate. Is the system behaving slowly? Is the system behaving in a way that it is not acceptable to the users to even go and then fetch a rate, because it's taking such a long time that they are not enjoying it anymore, and then they might leave the site and then go to the competition. So they want to find out what is the response time for, not only for these individual processes, but also the whole thing if we put together. Meaning that if somebody comes to the site, they're searching for a rate lookup, and then after they find the rates, they're eventually going to go and then make a reservation. Right? So we want to find out, like, how much time it is going to take. Now the business team is going to put forward the desired response time for these individual operations, right? So they would say that, well, for the rate lookup, the response time cannot be anything above, let's say, 8 seconds. So the response time has in under no circumstances can exceed 8 seconds when it comes to, like, rate lookup. So meaning that as soon as you enter the information and click that button, within 8 seconds, we should get the rates for whatever they are entering in there. So how would you go ahead and then measure the time? Right? For that, we have to start making use of what is called transactions. So where do we begin the transactions, and how do we write that, insert those transactions? Well, for that, let's say, if somebody logs into your website. So this, let's say, is the home page. This is the home page, and on home page you got links, and there's a link in here. This link is, let's say, to go to rate lookup. So when you click on that link, you basically go to rate lookup. This is the rate lookup page, and in the rate lookup page, we basically would start off with selecting a state and then clicking on go, let's say. And then when you do that, it is going to bring you to another page where we are going to look into some more details. Like, based on the state, there is some selection, right? The selection is the airport and the destination and whatever, right? So so I can say that this is a rate lookup continue, right? Okay, so here you have to not only make the selection for the airport selection, but also you have to, let's say that this is where you are going to, let's say where to city, and then you will be clicking on that, and then finally you would see the rates popping up saying that from JFK airport to Manhattan, right? It is, let's say, $78.50. So this is what we are looking for. So when they come and then click on that, so from clicking on this, right, coming to that, we need to probably measure this time. We need to measure this time, right? So that can be an individual transaction T1, and then from here to going here, that could be your T2. We need to measure that. Then from here to here, right, that could be your T3. So we need to measure that. So the total transaction T is going to be T1 plus T2 plus T3. All right. So in this case, so how do you measure now? What we are going to do is we will start a transaction here. We'll start a transaction here, right? Start T1, right? And we will end the T1 here. So end T1 here. So start T1, end T1, end T1. Likewise, start T2, end T2, and start T3, end T3, right? So that is going to be one transaction, that's going to be one transaction, that's going to be one transaction. So how do we do that? In the code, how are we going to do it? Well, for that, this is what we're going to do. So when we look into the rate, right? So we have to start understanding this piece of code. Now we can rather than splitting it as from here to here, we could have the whole thing starting from here onward. The whole thing can be one transaction. So we can start the transaction here, start transaction, end transaction. So the whole thing can be one transaction, or you can make these granular transactions, like smaller level of transactions, right? So you could do that. So let us look into, first of all, let me look into how to insert a transaction. So let us say that the whole thing, when the rate lookup process begins here and then it ends here, the whole thing can be a single transaction. So the question is, how do you go about creating a transaction? What is involved in creating a transaction? Well, it can be done graphically, or it can be done by writing the code. I'm going to start off with a little bit the difficult way, which is like writing the code. So to write the code, it's actually not so difficult, simple. So it's going to be the LR command, LR, right? And then we will say start underscore transaction. So as you do that, IntelliSense is going to pop up, and then it is going to basically let you complete. So as I complete this, it says that, well, to start a transaction, you need to name the transaction. There's a constant name the transaction. So let me name this transaction as, if you want to follow a certain convention, the convention can be, okay, this is a training right project, and then let's say this is JetBlue, and it is a frequent flyer build 2, right? Okay, in this transaction T, and this is for, let's say, rate lookup. So I can do this. The reason I am coming up with this kind of naming convention is because of the fact that when we start measuring the transaction, I mean, in fact, if I run this right now, it will give me, this is the start transaction. Every start transaction must have an end transaction. So I mean, I just cannot run this and then expect that this would work, because we have to have a start transaction and we have to have an end transaction. And then between that, whatever code is there for that code to execute for a single user, it is going to take, X or N number of seconds to do that. That's how you're going to measure it for a single user. But in real life, you're not measuring it. You're not the only person, who is going to use this site. There will be some load. So that is basically what we have to find out. Under a load, when you put a load, meaning that what is load if you have 50 users, if you have 7,000 users. So whatever the number is going to be, we need to find out how the response time is going to come back based on the load. So in order to measure the response time, which is nothing but this difference in the transaction, the start transaction and the end transaction for this process, this is going to give it to you under no load, only for a single user. So once we get to know as how to do this, so then basically we will be applying the load in the controller and try and find out like how it will behave based on different criteria. So first of all, to complete the script, I have to go and then I have to do the following. I have started the transaction. Let me end the transaction. Where do you want to end the transaction? I mean, start transaction. Actually, it should start here when you are doing this, when you're calling this function. So that's that function. So we are starting the transaction, and then let us go ahead and then end the transaction when the last function ends. And to end the transaction, I would do LR_end underscore transaction. As you can see, it auto completes. Now the end transaction, if you see here, if you see this, the end transaction takes two arguments. This is the first argument, that's the second argument. What is the first argument? The first argument is nothing but the name of the transaction. So I'm going to come in here and then copy this. The reason for that is if you try to type it out, there's a possibility that you might make a spelling mistake, and then basically it is going to not match. It is not going to be as a couple, meaning that if you start, you have to end. So that's like they go together. So this is end transaction. The second argument to the end transaction is the status of it. Now, is the transaction is going to fail or a pass? So I could go ahead and here I could use LR underscore. I could say fail. I could say pass. I could say so. In this case, I'm gonna say auto, meaning that I want it to figure it out whether this transaction passed, failed, what happened to this transaction. So I'm going to put an auto in here. Now, what is the need for you to have a fail or a pass or a done and all that? I'll talk to you in a second. That is because of your conditional logic. Okay, so we did have a transaction. We ended this transaction. We started this transaction. All right. So here is the start transaction, and that's the end transaction. Now, this think time is the time the user waits. The time the user waits in between performing this. So he goes and then clicks on that link, and then he's waiting. So we are trying to come as close to as human, with this script. By having this think time, the script is behaving simulating like a human. So, but when we are going to do the transactions, if we have the think time in between, the transaction is going to include those think time. So what we have to do is we don't want to comment them because we want it to be there, but we will take this whatever the think time is. I'm going to take it and then keep it before the start transaction. So that way there is still a part of the rate lookup, meaning that it is still trying to give the same simulation of how a real user would do it, but in terms of calculating the transaction time, we are not including that. Okay, so I just did a start transaction, end transaction, and I did only for the rate lookup. So I could pretty much do the same for my book new reservation. So in book new reservation, I could come in here and then again I could start a transaction. So let me just come in here and say now at this time, now that you have an idea of how to start a transaction and how to end a transaction, we will look into a slightly different way of starting this transaction and ending this transaction. So for that, let me see here. When I am in the code, when I'm in the script window, see this, look at my mouse, it goes in here, this one. That is going to insert a start transaction. Control T is also a shortcut for that. So if I click on that, window pops up, it is asking me for the name of the transaction. So the name of the transaction in this case is, I will say that, TR for training, right? JetBlue, FF, frequent flyer, build to, and it's a transaction T, and this is the transaction for, let's say, book new reservation. All right. So down the road, if I look at it, I know that okay, it's a transaction. This transaction belongs to the build 2 of the JetBlue frequent flyer for training right application, and this we are measuring it for book new reservation. So if I do that, if I hit enter, now notice that it inserts that command for me. Now likewise, where do I want to end the transaction? I come all the way in the bottom here, and I want to end the transaction. To end the transaction, I will again use this. See here on the top, this is to end the transaction. One is to start the transaction, the other one is to end the transaction. So if I come in here, do that, now it pre-populates. It shows you that, hey, this is the transaction, right? And then we will go ahead and then we will just hit OK. Now, the fact that we see here LR, auto, pass, fail, and stop and all that, the reason we see that is because those are the statuses of that. So I will go with an auto status. So here is the end transaction. So this is the end transaction. So the end transaction is basically the same name as the beginning of the transaction, except that we have the status. Okay. Now let me do the same for the cancel. So cancel, if I come and if I do that, start transaction, end transaction. I'm going to show it to you in a slightly different way here. Notice this task. Task is the workflow, right, of how you're doing this. So if you see here, these are all our basically items of the workflow. And if you go into the transaction, here are the transactions. So if I click on the transaction, it basically would tell me that I could insert transactions wherever I want to. In this case, where do I want to insert the transaction? I want to insert the transaction in the cancellation. So if you want to see how the transaction looks like in the task window, we were here in the script, right? And I could basically, let's say this is how it is. What is this task? Task is for people who let's say who don't have much idea of how to record and how to do. These are like step-by-step instructions which they HP LoadRunner guys, they are giving it to us, saying that these are the tasks which you have to follow if you have to make a test, and these are the tasks. So if you start off, this is what it is going to tell you. You can record an application, you can have the summary of that, you can verify by replaying that, and then you can go and then parameterize it, and then you can do the iterations and all that. So we already have a ready-made script, ready-made in the sense that in the previous video I made this, we made this script, you saw that, right? So now if you want to put, let's say this is a huge script, this is a long script, we have rate lookup, we have this, we have cancel reservations, we have change reservations, we have let's say login, we have log out, we have process credit, we have so many things in here. And then let's say we want to quickly go ahead and then we want to insert transactions in it. So if you're not able to track as where is what, there's a graphical way of inserting the transaction. First of all, what you do is wherever you want to insert the transaction, select that script, right? So we wanted to insert the transaction in the cancel reservation. So I selected that. Now come to this transaction here on the left, come to the transaction and click on the transaction. When you click on the transaction, in this window here, it will show you all the existing transactions, and if you click on that, it will highlight in the workflow where are those transactions. So here you can see those transactions. These are the two transactions. The one is for the rate and the other for the new reservation. So if you look into it, if you look into the scroll bar, it is telling you basically that this is the V unit as the action, V user in it, then the action itself, the whole action we had, which we are not using it. Then comes your rate lookup, then comes your book new reservation, and then comes your cancel reservation. Now we already have for the rate lookup. So let's see how their transaction is created. If you see here, see this, that is like create a new transaction. When you create a new transaction, when you click on this button, you can bring the start transaction here, and then this is the end transaction. Wherever you want to have the end transaction, that will come over here. So this is the graphical way of doing it. So you need not do it in a graphical way, but I'm just showing you all the possibilities. So over here in the cancellation, I want to do this new transaction. So I click on this new transaction and see this. I'm going to bring it and then I'm going to keep it. I'm going to drop it here. So the transaction is going to begin here, right? And the transaction is going to basically end here. So between the start and the end, I have to give the name of the transaction. The name of the transaction again is going to be TR, right? JetBlue and frequent flyer build to underscore. It's a T as in transaction underscore, and then I will call it cancel reservation. So by me doing this, what it did is, as you can see, it created that transaction. So this is a graphical way of doing it. So if I go back into the script and look into the cancellation, it would have done that. So let me go into the script and look into this. Here the transaction started, this is the transaction, and this is the end of the transaction. All right. So now you have seen as how to create transactions in your script in 3 different ways, right? I've shown it to you. All right. Now what we will do is we will run this. Let me just close this. We'll run it, and then we will see what it is going to produce in the log, in the replay log. So I save that, and then let me execute it. Let me run it. Okay, here is it. It's starting. Basically, it will go ahead and then try to connect, and then it is doing the rate lookup 1 iteration, rate lookup 2 iteration, rate lookup 3 iteration, right? Then book new reservation, and then basically cancel the reservation. Okay, so it had done all that. So it's still completing it. So once it settles down, let us bring up this and then see. When we started off, we put our first transaction in the rate, right? So let me just go navigate to the rate, and here it is. In the rate, as you can see in the blue, it will say that, okay, here is we have started a transaction. So it comes up with the notify that the transaction has been started, this transaction. When is the transaction going to end? It is going to end after this iteration, right? So if you see here, notify that it took 4.5 seconds. So it said that the rate lookup ended and it's a pass, right? And then it took like 4.5 seconds. So usually a transaction usually is the requirements in the specs in the documentation. Normally it is like 7 to 8 seconds, 10 seconds, depending on how big of a transaction it is. So this is 4.5 seconds. Okay. Now let us look into the second iteration, because if you recall in our the settings in the previous video, we have this in this block. We are doing the rate lookup 3 times. So that's why we are looking into the second time. And let's say second time what it is going to come up with. And so it came up with 2.6 seconds, right? And the third time it is coming out with let's say 2.85. Now this is under no load, meaning there's only one person, just me doing it. So once you start having like 5,000 people on the website, then we got to figure out what is going to happen to this. So that we will do it in the controller. In the controller, I'll show it to you, which is the second component of the LoadRunner. So we have, as you know, LoadRunner has those 3 components. One is the VU gen, the second one is the controller, and the third one is the analysis, right? So there's something which we do in here. We need it because in the controller, when we feed it with the different configuration settings, it is going to produce some results which we will analyze. So this is what it is. And now let us take a look into the transaction for your new reservation. The transaction for new reservation is, as you can see, the whole new reservation is taking about 3.9 seconds. Now let's look into the cancellation. The cancellation started here. The cancellation started here. And then for the cancellation code for a 1 user, it is taking about 1.81 seconds. All right. Okay. So now this is the whole, step by step which we have done. Let's say if you want to see the whole thing, like, or let's just to, show the page, just to show the page. Showing the page is here. Showing the page is here. So even here we can create a transaction, right? So this is for the navigation purpose. Here also I can create a transaction. So we can have transactions like that. Now in the transactions you can have sub transactions, meaning okay, now let us go to the rate lookup. Remember in that picture, what I have shown you is right now I have shown you this. For the rate lookup, we did not go from here to here, right? Here to here. I did the whole thing. From here up to here, the whole thing I measured, and then that took about like 4.7 seconds, 2.8 seconds. Now, let's say if you want to find out from here to here, how much time it is taking. From here to here, because one of the page, loading of the page from here to here might be slow, right? So that is slowing down the whole transaction. So if you want to find out the sub transactions or the nested transactions, what do we do? So for that, the sub or the nested transactions, we have to go and then we have to do the following. Inside this, the transaction started here, correct? The transaction started here. But within that transaction, I could have one more transaction, which is going to just measure how much of a response time it is taking to run only this function. So for the sub transaction, this is what we're going to do. We will do LR underscore, right? And we will say that LR underscore start underscore sub transaction. So here it is, start underscore sub. So what does it take? It takes two arguments. It takes basically the name which you want to give to this sub transaction and who is the parent transaction of that. So it takes two. So let me just go ahead with this and then give it a name. So this one would be this internal one or the sub one, which I'm doing it for what? This is for, let me see, this is for the rate lookup link, right? So I can say this, I will say that rate lookup, right? And this is going to be the sub transaction. So I will say ST as in sub transaction and rate lookup. And who is the parent for this one? The parent for this one is that. So I can take the parent and then put the parent name there. So that's the transaction. Now LR underscore start underscore sub transaction. So if a transaction starts, we want to find out that, okay, how much time it is going to take for this one, right? And so once we find out the time for this, then we will end the transaction, sub transaction here. So to end the sub transaction, I would say LR underscore end underscore sub transaction, and this will take what? The sub transaction name. Sub transaction name is that, and then because it already knows its parent, sub transaction name, and then it needs the LR underscore auto, right? So what is the status of it? Okay, so now what we have done is we had the original transaction for the complete rate lookup. Within it, I have nested transaction. This transaction is a sub transaction inside it, and this is only going to measure how much of a time it takes to click on that link, web URL rate lookup link, and then go there, right? So likewise, if you understood this, let us run and see what this is going to produce. Once you understand the sub transaction, then you can start using it wherever there is a need for it. So let us run it and see how it works. Probably you might want to do it for all of them. I just did it for one. You might want to use it for the rest of them. So let us just run and at least see what it is going to do. So we are in the vUser init. It is trying to go and then connect to it, and then we are in the rate lookup. We keep running 3 loops, and then after that the new reservation will run, and then after that basically your cancel reservation will run. Okay, so everything is running right now. Hopefully everything is going to be good, right? And then the test is over. If we see any errors, we will see things in red. If we don't see it, then we will just go ahead and then try to see what happened. So over here, I am interested in the rate. Here you go. So here, you see, this is the main transaction in the rate. In the rate lookup, this is the main transaction. And then there is a sub transaction, ST sub transaction for the rate lookup. So that sub transaction is going to end. We'll have 3 iterations. So here it ends. So it is telling us the sub transaction for it took like 1.87 seconds, right? And then the main transaction, it would give us the main transaction, which is the for rate lookup, that took like 4.2. So in the 4.2, 1.8 in the 4.2 just took for that link. So the other one is for those buttons, is for the web form submit. The other would be for the for this one. This one we already have. This one we already have. So the other one would be for this one, web submit form. Web submit form this, where we are selecting the state, and web submit form from that, where we are selecting the basically the airport and all that. So you can surround around this also, those sub transaction you could do around that also, sub transaction, right? So I think you got the idea. So in this video, what we have looked is we looked at the transactions. We looked at the need of the transactions. Why do we need the transactions? I showed you how to insert those transactions by writing the commands. I showed it to you by going with this, by using this insert start transaction, end transaction, and I also showed it to you from the task as we noticed that we went in here and then we did it from here as well. Well, then after that we looked into the sub transactions, and I have shown you how sub transactions are used inside the script. Well, that's about it in this video, and when we come back in the future videos, we're going to be looking into how to enhance the script by using some C programming. All right. Until then, keep practicing.